Marcus Webb was 17 years old. He had a grandmother named Ruth who woke up at 5 in the morning on the day of his court hearing and stood at the ironing board for 40 minutes. She ironed his white collar shirt until every crease was gone. Then she ironed it again. Not because it needed it. Because it was the only thing she could control that morning. Marcus watched her from the kitchen doorway. He didn't say anything. He understood. He ate his breakfast quietly. Toast. Orange juice. The kind of morning that feels too normal for what comes after it. The courthouse was a gray building on the corner of 5th and Delaney. It had been there since 1961. The floors were dark wood and the ceilings were high, and everything about the place was designed to make you feel small. Not small like a child feels small in a big building. Small like a person who does not matter feels small in a room full of people who are certain that they do. Marcus walked in with his public defender, a young man named Greg Ellison who carried too many files in one arm and apologized for things that weren't his fault. He apologized for the parking. He apologized for the wait. He had been assigned to Marcus's case 4 days ago and had reviewed it for a total of 1 hour and 20 minutes. The charge was trespassing. A vacant lot near Marcus's school. A shortcut he had been using for 3 months to walk home faster. The lot sat between 2 buildings and had a broken fence on one side and dry brown grass that nobody had cut since the previous summer. There was nothing in it. There had never been anything in it. It was just land that someone owned and nobody used. On a Tuesday afternoon in October, a police officer named Dale Pressner had driven past, seen Marcus crossing the lot, and stopped his car. He asked Marcus what he was doing. Marcus said he was walking home. Pressner asked if he saw the sign. Marcus looked around. He didn't see any sign. He told the officer that. Pressner wrote the report anyway. Trespassing. Posted property. Willful violation. Marcus was taken to the station, processed, and released to his grandmother's custody 2 hours later. Ruth Webb did not cry in front of the officers. She waited until they were in the car. The courtroom filled up slowly. There were 3 other cases on the docket that morning. Families sat in the gallery with the particular stillness of people who have been told to be on their best behavior in a place that will not extend them the same courtesy. Marcus sat at the defense table. He kept his hands flat on the surface in front of him, the way his grandmother had told him to. Keep your hands where they can see them. Don't fidget. Don't roll your eyes. Don't look angry even if you are. Especially if you are. He sat straight. Judge Harold Fenwick entered at 9:14. He was 61 years old, heavy through the shoulders, with white hair that he combed to the side with precision. He had been a judge in this district for 22 years. He walked to his seat the way men walk when they have not been questioned in a long time, without looking at anyone directly, without needing to. He reviewed the file. He looked up. He looked at Marcus. Trespassing, he said, more to himself than to anyone. Posted property. The ADA, a man named Philip Holt, confirmed the charge. He read from his notes. The lot was private property. The sign was visible from the entrance. The defendant had been observed crossing the property in clear violation. Fenwick nodded slowly. He looked at Marcus again over the rim of his reading glasses. He had the expression of a man who had already made a decision and was simply waiting for the formality of saying it out loud. Then he said, "Son, can you even read?" The words landed in the room and sat there. Greg Ellison opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Someone in the gallery exhaled through their nose. A woman 2 rows back pressed her lips together. Marcus did not move. He had prepared himself for many things that morning. His grandmother had prepared him. He had been prepared by 17 years of understanding, picked up piece by piece the way you pick up a language that nobody officially teaches you, through observation, through repetition, through the accumulated evidence of how certain rooms treat certain people. He kept his hands flat on the table. Fenwick continued, his voice carrying the comfortable authority of a man who had never once in his adult life been made to feel stupid in public. He spoke about the purpose of posted signs. He spoke about civic responsibility. He said something about young men who didn't think rules applied to them. He was mid-sentence when the door at the back of the courtroom opened. She came in without hurrying. Her name was Adiz Okonkwo. She was 43, with natural hair pulled back and a brown leather bag over one shoulder and the particular quality of stillness that belongs to people who have learned to be the calmest person in a tense room because someone has to be. She had been called by Marcus's aunt, who had seen her name on a community legal aid board online. Okonkwo had taken the case the previous evening. She had spent that night making phone calls. She set her bag down at the defense table, placed one sheet of paper beside it, and looked at the judge. Your Honor. My name is Adiz Okonkwo. I'm entering an appearance as counsel for the defendant. Fenwick looked at her. You're late. I'm here, she said. There was a pause that lasted exactly long enough to mean something. Fenwick told her to proceed. She did not look at her paper. She already knew what was on it. She had known since 11:17 the previous evening when a clerk at the city's public works department had answered her call and, after some searching, had given her a date. Your Honor, the prosecution's case rests entirely on the presence of a posted no trespassing sign on the property in question. Before we proceed, I'd like to ask the prosecution to confirm, for the record, the date on which that sign was installed. Philip Holt looked up from his notes. The sign was clearly visible at the time of the installation date, Okonkwo said. Specifically. Holt looked at his papers. He turned a page. He turned it back. Fenwick frowned. Mr. Holt, this should be straightforward. I'm looking, Your Honor. He looked for 4 minutes. He did not find it because it was not in his file. It had not been in anyone's file. Nobody had checked. Nobody had thought to check because the outcome of this particular case, in this particular courtroom, on this particular morning, was not supposed to require checking. Fenwick called a short recess. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Okonkwo stood with Marcus and his grandmother, who had finally come inside. Ruth Webb was 71 years old and wore a gray coat and carried her purse with both hands in front of her, the way she carried everything, carefully, as if it might be taken. Will they find it? Marcus asked quietly. They'll find that there's nothing to find, Okonkwo said. Marcus looked at her. You already knew. I made a call last night. 6 minutes. The city's public works office keeps installation logs. The sign on that property was installed 4 days after your arrest. Ruth Webb said nothing. She looked at the floor. She had heard things like this before. Not the specific details were always different, but the shape of it. The shape she recognized. So he arrested him for walking past a sign that didn't exist yet, she said. Yes. Ruth nodded once. The way people nod when they are not surprised but are still tired. They went back inside. The recess had lasted 11 minutes. During those 11 minutes, Philip Holt had made 2 phone calls. He had spoken to his supervisor. He had spoken to someone in the city records office. By the time everyone returned to their seats, the color in his face had changed slightly, not dramatically, the way it happens in movies, but in the small, real way that happens when a person realizes that a thing they said with confidence was wrong. Okonkwo submitted the installation record into evidence. It was a single page. A municipal log. A date and a property address and a work order number. She read the date aloud for the record. She then read aloud the date of Marcus's arrest. The difference was 4 days. She did not editorialize. She did not raise her voice or make a speech. She simply let the 2 dates sit next to each other in the air of the courtroom and do what 2 dates with a 4-day gap do when one of them is supposed to justify the other. Fenwick looked at the paper. He looked at Holt. He looked at the paper again. There is a specific expression that appears on the face of a person who has said something they cannot take back, in front of people who cannot unhear it, about a subject that now, in light of new information, makes them look like something they would prefer not to look like. It is not guilt, exactly. It is the expression that comes just before a person decides whether to feel guilt or to feel irritation instead. Fenwick chose irritation. It is the safer of the two. It requires less. He told Holt that the prosecution needed to address the evidentiary gap. Holt said he would need time. Okonkwo said, calmly, that her client had already waited long enough. The charges were dropped 40 minutes later. Not with ceremony. Not with acknowledgement. The case was simply dismissed, the way you close a tab on a computer, quickly, so you don't have to look at it anymore. Marcus stood up when Okonkwo touched his arm. He straightened his shirt. He picked up the folder Greg Ellison had left behind, because Greg had already gathered his other files and was halfway to the door, late for his next case. Nobody apologized. This is the part that does not appear in the stories people tell about moments like this. They tell about the victory. They tell about the twist and the question and the date that didn't match. They leave out what comes after, which is not a triumphant moment but a regular hallway, fluorescent lights, the sound of another case being called in the courtroom they just left. Marcus walked out. On the courthouse steps, the October air was cold and flat. Okonkwo stood with him for a moment while Ruth came down behind them, holding the railing with one hand. Marcus asked the question he had been holding since the hallway. "How did you know to check the sign's date?" Okonkwo looked at him. "I didn't know. I suspected. When a case is this thin and the police report is that confident, there's usually something that nobody bothered to verify. So I verified it." 6 minutes, he said. 6 minutes. He thought about that. He thought about the fact that nobody who had been assigned to his case before Okonkwo arrived had spent 6 minutes on that specific question. He thought about the white shirt his grandmother had ironed twice. He thought about the word his grandmother used sometimes, routine, said not the way most people say it but the way she said it, low and flat, like it was the name of something that had been living in the house for years and had never been invited. "What happens to the officer?" he asked. Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. "That depends on whether someone files a complaint. Whether that complaint is reviewed. Whether the person reviewing it finds a reason to act on it. And usually." She looked at him with the honesty that is one of the harder gifts to give a 17-year-old. "Usually, not much. Not right away." Marcus nodded. He had expected that answer. Expecting it didn't make it weigh less. Ruth Webb reached the bottom step. She did not say anything to Okonkwo right away. She looked at her grandson first, the whole of him, the way mothers and grandmothers look at people they love after something has happened, doing a private inventory, checking for damage. She put her hand on the back of his neck. Just for a second. Just long enough. Then she turned to Okonkwo and said, "Thank you for coming." Okonkwo said it was her job. Ruth said, "A lot of people's job is a lot of things they don't do." Okonkwo didn't have an answer for that. Nobody really does. The vacant lot on 5th was sold the following spring to a private development company. Permits were filed. Demolition was scheduled. Within 8 months there were condominiums going up, modern ones, with large windows and a rooftop terrace and a leasing office with a glass door. The no trespassing sign went up on the new perimeter fence sometime around February. This one was real. This one had a proper date on the back. This one was installed before anyone was arrested. Nobody walked through it now anyway. There was nothing left to cross. Judge Harold Fenwick retired the following year. The announcement in the local bar newsletter cited his 23 years of service to the district. There was a small reception in the courthouse conference room. Someone brought a cake. Officer Dale Pressner received no formal disciplinary action in connection with Marcus Webb's arrest. His record from that period shows 7 other trespassing citations filed in the same 12-month window. 5 of them were later reviewed as part of a broader audit. 2 were flagged. Neither resulted in formal consequences. Philip Holt was promoted to senior ADA 18 months after the hearing. He is, by most accounts, good at his job. He checks his evidence more carefully now. He will tell you that himself if you ask him. Marcus Webb enrolled in a pre-law program at a state university the following fall. He commuted from home for the first year to save money. His grandmother packed him lunch on class days, the same lunch, more or less, that she had packed when he was in middle school. He didn't tell her she didn't have to. He understood that it was not about the lunch. He has not spoken publicly about the hearing. Not in any interview, not on any platform, not to any of the people who have asked him, and people have asked, because Okonkwo mentioned the case in a panel discussion 2 years later and the brief summary of it moved through certain corners of the internet with the speed that stories move when they confirm something people already knew was true but rarely get to see documented. He read the comments once. Then he closed the tab. There is a version of this story where Marcus Webb stands at a podium one day and speaks. Maybe he will. He is 20 years old now, and there is a great deal of time for things to become the stories we decide to tell about them. For now, he studies. He reads cases. He reads them the way his grandmother ironed collars, with complete attention, going over the same surface twice, looking for the thing that everyone else decided not to look for. He is very good at finding it. There is a photograph from the morning of the hearing that his aunt took on her phone before they went inside. It is not a remarkable photograph. It shows Marcus and his grandmother on the sidewalk in front of the courthouse. Ruth is adjusting his collar. Her hands are at his neck, fingers pressing the fabric flat. Marcus is looking slightly to the side, not at the camera, not at anything in particular. Just standing. Just waiting for whatever comes next. It is still on his aunt's phone. She has not posted it anywhere. Some things do not need an audience to matter.